Hello and welcome to the Uposatha, the full moon of November. And it's good there is a full moon because my kuti is particularly dark. I only have one light, a ceiling light of the dangly cord variety, and that is in the washroom, not the main part of my kuti, but it's enough. However, at the moment it's not enough because the sea air causes anything metal to corrode rather quickly here. So with time over the past year it's corroded and seized up the socket fitting for the light bulb, and eventually gone bang like this, fused everything in the night. Having just had another similar external lamp fixed for the same reason, or cut off, removed for the same reason. Now, today I'm going to fix this one myself later on today because it's a simple job. I'll somehow acquire the fitting, jump up the step ladders and do some electrician's work. Otherwise it's a very long and arduous process to find someone to come and do it for me. That is allowed. Jobs like that monks, bhikkhus can do, maintenance, fixing. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but for very good reasons, we can't do gardening, planting, growing. So I still have some new trees which require, some need to be left in their potting compost arrangements that they've been recently planted into for, I've been told, 20 days before they're planted. So that gives me some leeway. And in the meantime, hopefully someone will come along with a spade and be able to dig and plant some of the trees that have been kindly offered. And you'll see today we also have candlelight. We have light that isn't blowing out by the fan. So we have light and fan all at the same time. And flowers. Some lovely family yesterday, on the occasion of their birthday, came and made offerings, which were including those beautiful lantern candle holders, some flowers and other requisites for the Sangha, but particularly for my use here. And this is how we're supported. So we're dependent on lay practitioners, lay people, men and women, whom are still in worldly life, who haven't renounced, to do certain things that mean we cannot just live as complete recluses in the middle of nowhere. That rule in the Vinaya for not being able to dig the earth isn't just to protect our sila, because of course we might kill various things by digging a spade into the earth. Although this would not be intentional, it's something we can assume might be happening, a bit like driving. We don't intentionally kill a lot of bugs by driving a vehicle, but it's likely and we know it probably will happen. So we avoid such activities. But digging the earth is precluded by way of our Vinaya rules, in order that we can't just become self-sufficient. After all, I could just grow a whole bunch of potatoes and carrots and greens and salads. There's fruit growing in abundance. I'd need no need of other people. I could live here quite independently if I was able to do that. But that would not be as a bhikkhu, because a bhikkhu is required to go out on Pindapata to collect one's daily foods, ready prepared to eat for that day's sustenance in order that they can practice. If I was independent, I'd have no contact with the lay folk, with people who haven't renounced. The same goes for community monks or nuns, all living together in communities. They still have to go on Pindapata, alms round, or receive visitors to the monastery offering food at the appropriate time, in order that they have this continuous contact This is the fourfold assembly of upasakas, upasikas, that's laymen and laywomen, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, monks and nuns. We support each other like the four legs of a table. So moving on to the first comment here, we have, how can I have compassion for my enemies? How can I have compassion for myself? So the short answer to that is, one begins with developing compassion for yourself. You don't have compassion, you don't do compassion, you can't force compassion. You develop the quality of compassion, firstly towards yourself. You're kind to yourself. This can be based on keeping the moral precepts. This ensures you do no harm to yourself. No killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants. And then you allow yourself time to sit and practice meditation. This is allowing your body to become relaxed and your mind to settle and become calm. And this practice, this is encompassing a large part of the Noble Eightfold Path. So just living in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path, the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, having taken refuge in the Buddha, our teacher, and the Dharma, his teachings, with the support of the Sangha, as I was just talking about, that interdependent relationship of lay folk and monastics, you have support. As we have support, so do lay practitioners have support. Primarily of our teacher and the Dharma. So you take refuge in that. This is having compassion for yourself, being kind to yourself. If you're suffering, if you're having physical ailments or mental anguish, treat it firstly, deal with what can be dealt with, but then through meditation see the reality, the truth of it and the cause. So developing compassion for yourself firstly, this is what then leads on to you naturally having that quality, which is there, a quality, not exclusive to yourself, not selfish in any way, but available for all beings. You will have compassion naturally for all beings. So that's the short-ish answer. But the more complex issue here, the thing to deal with is, what do you mean? How can I have compassion for my enemies? What are your enemies? Are there people really trying to physically harm you, to take away anything you have? That may be the case. And this perhaps you could class as enemies, external attackers. But even so, they're only taking what you're going to lose eventually anyway. All conditioned things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and they're not within our control. So understanding through the development of wisdom, panya, which is coming from that practice of sila and samadhi, moral virtue and meditation, leading to wisdom, panya, you'll know, you'll understand the characteristics of existence, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, anatta, not self. Someone steals your brand new phone. Are you considering them your enemy? They've broken their own precepts. They've created their own bad karma. This is the time you can see that their suffering is greater than yours. Or it will be. This is how you can see there is still compassion that you've already developed within yourself as a quality for that person. Their wrongdoing is going to cause them suffering, and you can more easily have compassion for them. But they're not really enemies, are they? This is a word you've picked up. It's a word we use. We'll have loving kindness, metta and compassion for our loved ones, in those that we're indifferent to, and those that are our enemies. Well, I normally say those we don't like so much. And eventually we might come to our enemies, if there are such. But there are very few real enemies that are directly our own personal enemies. One might be in a war-torn zone, a country, where there are two countries fighting with each other, political systems fighting with each other. This is one's enemies, but they're not your personal enemies. They're enemies of the state or the country or the organization. They're collective enemies. They're constructs. They're political organizations, they're political actions, they're things going on around us which have always been there. It has always been so, since the time of the Buddha and since long before the time of the Buddha, as a result of greed, hatred and delusion in individuals, and then collectively organizations and systems at odds with each other. But personally, you don't really have any enemies if you're keeping sila yourself. If you are doing no harm to yourself and no harm to others, you are giving the gift of fearlessness. The greatest gift of dana, generosity, you can give is that of fearlessness to others and kindness to others, loving kindness through metta. The quality of metta you have. This makes it very hard for people to turn themselves into your enemies. It is often this view of enemies, my enemies, as something that you've manifested in your own imagination. You've created those that are doing you harm into monsters, into enemies, into boogeymen, things that go creak, is it? Or bang in the night, I don't know the expression. But it's an imaginary concept of your own doing, your own cause. You've created an enemy. Someone doing you harm is doing themselves harm. You make them the enemy. So how do you have compassion for them? Well, if you have compassion for yourself, you won't have enemies. So the questioning, the thought process there is the wrong way around. Firstly, compassion for yourself. Secondly, you'll automatically have that quality, which is for all beings. Thirdly, you don't have any enemies. Only people who are suffering. And we have compassion for all beings whom are suffering. So, this is a statement here. You said, which is me, I guess, as long as there is a monk in robes, there is a Sangha. Could this apply to the world outside the Buddhist Sangha? What I mean, as long as we have people who are focused on love and kindness, regardless of background, belief, etc., we then have a Sangha outside the Buddhist cohort. There is hope in the world when we have individuals who are motivated to spread love and peace and nurture the other beings of the world. Yes, in an ideal world through rose-tinted glasses, wouldn't the world be a lovely place? I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I can't remember the rest of the lines, but it was an old Coca-Cola advert that was all about peace and love. And yes, isn't this a wonderful value and an idea to have? But without some sort of way of practice and some wisdom and understanding as to how this can come about, as you can see, historically, it doesn't happen. There are still people who don't live that way, who don't live a life of moral virtue. It starts with sila, keeping precepts. So whether you call it Buddhism or you call it anything, or other religions that have moral codes, which they all do, they have commandments or things one should not do. things one should refrain from. All religions are based on some kind of morality in that sense, and those that are following that code of morality strictly are leading a life generally of peace and love, despite whatever religion. But the question that you were referring to, where we were talking about, was with regards to the Buddha's teachings and his statement that the Sangha would continue for a set amount of time after his parinibbana, so after he attained to eventual no future rebirth. Then as a result of that co-dependence of lay people and the Sangha, the ordained monks and nuns, the Buddha Sasana, the Buddhist system, or you can call it religion if you like, but there is no belief structure or worshipping in progress there, would last for approximately 5,000 years, and we're approximately halfway through that period. So this is the Sangha we're talking about, the Arya Sangha, the noble Sangha, those ordained Buddhist monks and nuns whom are specifically adhering to a code of conduct coming from the Vinaya, a whole body, book, catalogue of thousands of rules, but contained within them are 227 bhikkhu rules for monks and 311 bhikkhuni rules for nuns, that on this Uposatha day we recite with our fellow Sangha members. Not in my case, I live alone and one requires 5, including yourself, for the recitation of the Patimokkha on each Uposatha. If I go to visit a monastery with other monks, I can partake in that. We have confessional processes where we just simply reflect upon where we may have transgressed any of those 227 rules. Now, most of those are supportive of the primary 5 precepts all lay Buddhist practitioners are striving to keep, of no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants. And not so much rules, but guidelines that support our practice. Now, we are the only organisation, that is the ordained Sangha of Buddhist monks and nuns, that follow those precepts. So that is the Sangha we're referring to in that sense. Sangha, maybe in other languages and in other cultures, might have a different meaning, and you may have a different understanding of it. It may be that you view it as the collective amalgamation of all Buddhists, lay practitioners and ordained Buddhist monks and nuns. But there is a difference, there is a defined barrier, physically and mentally, between that of an ordained monk or nun and that of a lay man or woman. We cannot live together. We cannot live in the same place. We don't have ordinary interactions that one might have with a man or a woman, or even a monk might have with a fellow monk, with lay practitioners. There is a degree of separation there. To keep the Sangha and their Patimokkha, their rules, their Vinaya, their Sila, pure, absolutely pure. And that is the example the Sangha sets to lay practitioners. Not that they have to renounce and follow all those rules, but the example of really keeping their Sila pure. And this example is seen by that interdependence and that interaction each day with monks or nuns on Pindapata, going on alms round through the village and into the town to collect their daily food and then return. And any interactions where lay practitioners visit the monastery with their offerings, or in my case, a lone practicing monk, they can still visit me here, as you can, and people do. Especially now, as we can meditate here in this meditation hall, which is very comfortable for that purpose. So, yes, you can dream of peace and love and have this view, but if you want it to be so, you have to do it, and it begins with yourself and setting the example, and then associating with others that are also following the example of the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And then extending it to as many as possible by way of not preaching, not evangelizing, not proselytizing, lecturing, standing on a soapbox, but by setting a good example, practicing what you don't preach, just doing, being kind, being good. Wow, this is quite a long one, so I've highlighted some bits. I hope I haven't missed any important aspects. Try and keep comments relatively concise, so at least they fit on a screen. Otherwise I can't physically deal with them. And I don't really read through them prior to these recordings. This isn't pre-prepared. I simply copy or put the individual comments that contain questions in a place altogether that I can read them for the first time here and now. So my answers are not rehearsed. But if I see a big long one, I have to then find the question and highlight it. And then, well, I don't like to do that. Then I'm going to start thinking about that question beforehand. But I can't remember even highlighting this, so I presumably didn't. Let's read it. You said that those abusive people forget that we are all the same. So, are we the same in the way that we share samsara? Is that what you mean? All beings are subject to greed, hatred and delusion. That's what I mean. We are within this realm, human and animal realm, which is also frequented, I understand, by devas and beings from other realms, maybe ghosts. But what we know is this human realm, this is our existence, and what we were referring to in a previous talk were other beings whom may be abusive towards us, but they're no different to us. They're of the same nature. They're suffering from the same defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. But some people have got those more in check, are leading, whether they're practicing Buddhists or not, maybe leading a life with moral virtue where others are not. But essentially we're all the same, with the same ingredients, but using it in different ways. Then you go on to say, either way, my question is, let's say that my physical body got hurt after a very long emotional abuse, and now body reacts to things that normally it wouldn't react to. I'd appreciate any advice on how to return to my normal state and stop all of that, how to stay in that compassion state. The feeling is a high heartbeat, sweating, burning sensation in the body all over, and a high-pitched noise in the ears. So you're suffering from what would be probably described as anxiety. I hope I'm not too far from the mark there. And anxiety will certainly be alleviated, not through trying to return to any sense of normal, but by having compassion for yourself firstly, again, not trying to have compassion for others when you're not compassionate for yourself, and allowing yourself, having determined to keep the precepts. That is very much the foundation of this practice, which is why I keep repeating it and coming back to it. It may seem in some cases, oh, I'm in pain, or I'm really suffering emotionally at the moment, to think that keeping precepts has nothing to do with that, to curing that. But I can assure you, it all begins with the mind, and to have a peaceful and calm state of mind, one has to have a clean conscience, a clean slate. Has to begin from a place of moral neutrality. And that starts with keeping those very basic and simple precepts. But someone who isn't keeping the precepts, for instance, who's stealing things or lying or having illicit affairs, or someone who's drinking, whatever I say, it's not going to help them. No, it's really not, because their mind is affected by doing those things. So without precepts, whatever I say, whatever you do, won't work. It's that simple. So this is why we begin with taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, which is just reminding ourselves of Buddhism, our teacher, his teachings, and the Sangha that's there to support you, and you are able, out of your compassion, to support them, support the Sangha, as you support me so generously, allowing me to be here in this country, practicing in what's a difficult place sometimes, but that's part of my practice. And not everybody would want to do this, but my doing it is an example to others that it can be done. Renunciation can be still practiced this way, really renouncing everything, not living in communities that are very well supported with lots of creature comforts, but living in less supported environments that don't have such comforts and are a little more basic. Those that have visited me see where I live, how I live, know how it is. And you might look at it and think, oh yeah, that's great, but not many of you will really want to do that yourselves. Now, I enjoy that lifestyle through benefiting it from its simplicity, and that interlaced with my practice has come to be my way of life and requires very little support. So you're not looking to try to return to normal in your case, but to recognize that you're suffering from anxiety. And the way to reduce anxiety is quite simply this same path of practice. With Sila, you should start with the practice of meditation. Don't try and force metta, meditation, compassion, all of this, loving kindness and compassion, karuna, but just to give yourself time to sit for an hour and do nothing, and listen to nothing, think about nothing, read nothing, look at nothing. And let those physical symptoms of anxiety subside naturally. Maybe increase for a little while, but then eventually, if there's nothing to interfere with you sensually, physically or mentally, they will subside naturally. When you can see that happening of its own accord, it will naturally be available to you to happen of its own accord when faced with situations that do cause you some anxiety. The result of this will be that all those physical manifestations of anxiety, which are so representative and visual or physically evident of the mental state, and are a good example of how our mental emotional states always have corresponding physical reactions, as do our physical feelings. Pain, for instance, always does have a corresponding emotional reaction. You can see the interconnected nature of the body and the mind in this way very clearly. This is a lesson, a teaching in itself for you to understand. But this will only be seen clearly. A word that means in Pali, seeing clearly, is vipassana, through meditation. No, it's not a thing, vipassana meditation, oh, I'm going to do vipassana now. You don't do vipassana, you develop the quality of seeing clearly. The way we do this is sit and relax and observe the breath. That's it, just that. Now if you do this, you keep Sila and you practice meditation every day. Do it for an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. Then these symptoms of anxiety will soon go away, mentally and physically. You're cutting them off at the source. Because in meditation you're not thinking about the past. And then it doesn't end there. When you get up from your meditation, you've put your mind into a place of concentrating, focusing on a mental object, a meditation object, something like the breath, which is very apparent and easy to recognize. But it's in the body and it's in the present moment, here and now. Keep your mindfulness, when not doing anything else, on that meditation object, whether it's the breath or a mantra, Bhutto, 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 something like that. But the breath preferably. It's also indicative of your bodily and mental emotions, bodily feelings and mental emotions. Keep your mindfulness, sati, on that. And this will be a great comfort, a great support to you throughout all of your daily activities. And this adds that continuation from the meditation formerly of sitting in samadhi, concentration, to mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities. And with mindfulness in all of your daily activities, whether it's on the breath when you have nothing to do, or whether it's on the action of what you're actually doing in the present moment, you're not thinking about the past. It's gone, it cannot be changed. But it's finished. It's not happening anymore. And if it can be avoided, it won't happen in the future. So you make efforts to avoid it happening again in the future, and you don't need to even give any minutes or seconds thought to what's happened in the past. And by this practice, you will not be doing that. You will not be dwelling in the past. You will be maintaining a presence here and now. If you are scared and don't face the mind, always hears the scares and obeys it. Will it be trained in more and more reactions of the sort and dominate you? If you're scared and don't face the mind, always hears the scares and obeys it, will it be trained in more and more reactions of the sort and dominate you? I think the translation might have gone a little bit skew with there, but I think what you're saying is if you're fearful of your imagination, so you imagine ghosts and become fearful of what is not actually there, your reactions will be accordingly so. I think just remember, the mind is the forerunner of all things, and what we're experiencing can only be through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and thinking. But putting thinking aside for the moment, albeit that's the forerunner of all things, if you can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, or touch it, it isn't. Okay? So it is not part of this experience. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Without that, it is just imagination. It is just in the mind. And that is due to the mind creating something to fill space. So fill that space with something else. Fill it with thoughts of loving kindness for all beings, compassion for all beings, joy for all beings. Or fill it with a mantra, or fill it with, best of all, mindfulness of a meditation object, the breath, when you can. Or maintaining mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities and what you're doing in the present moment, here and now. And this is occupying the mind usefully, rather than in the realms of imagination or worrying about the past or imagining what might happen in the future, creating unnecessary fears. That is a habit, yes, and I think this is what you're suggesting. If you're in that habit, how to get out of it. That's how to get out of it, replacing that habit with some other activity. Some chanting, a mantra, meditation is the best. Walking meditation, if you're very restless and your brain is very active. And just mindfulness in all of your daily activities when you're not sitting or having the opportunity to sit in meditation. I have found when I go deep into most practices in different religions, they tend to draw me away from my family and loved ones in order to obtain higher insight. Is there a way for a layman who is very committed to family and needed by loved ones to attain nibbana? Is being a committed parent/partner an attachment or a hindrance? The question has made me look at the bodhisattva idea. Okay, so just the end bit there, the bodhisattva idea is so relinquishing or giving up on the idea that one might become enlightened and attain to nibbana until all other beings have done so first. So, I mean, I don't subscribe to that idea because that is not going to happen for a very, very long time, and the Buddha clearly points us in the direction of attaining to enlightenment ourselves, firstly, to set the example that others can then follow, and therefore enabling, showing, giving the tools to all other beings to become enlightened themselves, much more quickly than everyone waiting for everyone to go first. Imagine a queue at a bus when everybody says, no, after you, after you. No one's going to get on the damn thing, are they? That never happens here or in India, that's for sure. But it does in some polite cultures. You see, you think, well, come on, someone make the first move. It's not going to happen. So we'll dispense with that for now. But with regards to your practice in different religions and going deep, again, I'm not really sure quite what that means. But as I was talking about, the Sangha requires lay practitioners. The lay practitioners require the Sangha. Yes, lay practitioners can attain to nibbana. The likelihood is, whilst one is in family life with a partner, a wife or a husband, and you have young children growing up and you're working to support them, that might not be possible during that time. But even if you were living in a monastic community, you may have duties and responsibilities and a lot to do before the time will be available to solely concentrate on your meditation practice, developing samadhi, developing jhana, and really eradicating those defilements. After all, that's what enlightenment is. Getting rid of greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, that's not to say with a wife and children you can't eradicate greed, hatred, and delusion, and therefore become enlightened. But it's very difficult. It's also not that easy in a large monastic community where there are many duties and things going on, which is why you don't hear of so many enlightened beings these days, through the nature of complexity. But in solitude and living alone, given the opportunity, you can practice. Now, our lives go through phases. We have our growing up phase, our adolescent or teenage phase, then we might be a bachelor or a spinster phase. Spinster's a funny old-fashioned word, and bachelor's less so, but single people enjoying life, working, building careers, not settled down in a family life. Then that comes along, family life and settling down, bringing up children, growing the family, and work, careers. All of this gets in the way, as can community life. It can be, and is in some cultures, a career being a monk or a nun. I don't think of it as such. I got out of that as quickly as I could, to be a monk, to be a bhikkhu, to just go on Pindapata as my occupation, eat and then practice, and maybe share the Dharma occasionally when given the opportunity to do so. And these are the choices we make. But the Sangha is there to support those choices you've made as lay practitioners to remain in family life and help with issues that arise within family life in connection with your practice, but also all other dharmas, relationship breakdowns, family tragedies. We're here, the Sangha are here to support those situations, those events. And you are also there supporting us, the Sangha. So in this respect, living as a layman shouldn't be seen as something that is separate. And unless you're inclined towards renunciation, nekkhamma, giving up worldly life, leaving the family to ordain, there isn't a transition. It is, right, family, I am off now, as the Buddha did. He didn't even speak about it, but he did bring in rules later on to require monks or nuns who wish to ordain to get permission from at least their parents before they could ordain, whatever age you are, to ensure that you haven't given up any responsibilities or duties, abandoned those to escape for some reason. It should be with their blessing, with their permission. Now, the Buddha, leaving his wife and newly born child, was leaving them in a very secure and well-supported environment. He had no real duties or responsibilities other than emotionally towards them. Knowing that, he could go and seek enlightenment on his path of asceticism, which took some 6 years before he eventually found the middle way, attained to enlightenment, and then some time more before he returned to his family to say, hey, look, this is what I've done. For which they were all very supportive. But this is quite a unique situation. So normally one would wait until the family's grown up. But this doesn't mean you're not building and developing the qualities, the parami, of generosity, of truthfulness, of mindfulness, of samadhi through your practice, of truthfulness, of faith, saddha, of some form of renunciation, perhaps on these Uposatha days, by keeping 8 precepts, refraining from eating in the afternoon, refraining from entertainment, from sexual activities, from beautification, from lying around on comfortable furniture, and dedicating 1 day a week or 2 days a month or 1 day a month on the full moon or the new moon or both, or just a Sunday each week or a Saturday, whatever's convenient. Could be Tuesday or Wednesday. 1 day a week where you take that time just for yourself, to have less to interact with the family, but for you just to keep those extra precepts. They can join you in that, or you might do it alone. But if that's not convenient to them also, then you can do this by going on retreats occasionally to monasteries. But don't see it as you're missing out. You'll have the same obstacles in the way of your practice if you were to ordain. From day one, you'd be looking at probably something like a minimum of 7 years before you're just able to concentrate on your practice again. Now, you probably, in even family life, have more opportunities to take some days or even just some hours alone in a room in your house somewhere to practice undisturbed. You might not always find that so readily available in community life in a monastery. So don't see going deep into, as you describe it, religious practices as being something of burying your head in the sand and escaping the world. It never is that. That is just burying your head in the sand and escaping the world. Like I said, with this interdependence, even bhikkhu and bhikkhuni life, ordained life, isn't that. It's very much being dependent on the rest of the world, but in a different way. But like your family are dependent on you now, you're dependent on them, you can support each other. Within the family structure, it's a wonderful opportunity to develop the Dharma. Even if they are not in line with your way of thinking, by your practice, you will demonstrate a way by which they can also benefit, and will come to see quite quickly that by the way you keep precepts and the effect that you practicing meditation has on you is of huge benefit to them as well as yourself. And they will see that it can be of huge benefit to themselves, and they'll only want to join you. This is always the way. Even after having been abandoned, the Buddha's family, they all joined him. They didn't say, oh well, we're having nothing more to do with you, you abandoned us. No, but this doesn't mean that that opportunity is there for you now. The best opportunity you have is within the family environment until such a time comes when, if it's necessary, you can ordain. But people do attain to Nibbana, arahants, or just to the, not just to, but the very high attainment, the first level of enlightenment, sotapanna, being free from doubt, free from rites, the dependence on rites and rituals, a full understanding of the characteristics of existence, the Four Noble Truths, inclusive of the Noble Eightfold Path, and a complete abandonment of Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view. This first level of stage of enlightenment, sotapanna, stream entry. There is nothing to preclude you in lay life from attaining to that. Subsequent to that, to attain to Nibbana, or an arahant, the level of arahantship, the fourth stage of enlightenment and final stage of enlightenment, where you have eradicated greed, hatred and delusion, is just a progression, attenuating that greed, hatred and delusion through to the stage of arahant, which will come later in life, in family life, and probably still later in life in monastic life, because monastic life is just a much larger family. So although there is a huge difference, there is also a huge similarity. So don't make it so black and white, I cannot be deep in my practice in family. If you cannot be deep in your practice as you describe it in your family, you will not be deep in your practice in monastic life. In fact, it will be less likely. The opportunities and the availabilities are there for you, and more within your control in family life. There are distractions, there are annoyances, but it's up to you whether you jump on board with those or whether you take them as lessons and teachers in your practice and use them as ways of seeing clearly the nature of existence. So the final question, are there any YouTube channels you would recommend to watch Dharma talks, other than your channel, of course? I think that's the hardest question so far today, because I just don't know the answer. I have certain teachers from my tradition I listen to whom don't necessarily have YouTube channels per se. And personally, I don't listen to YouTube channels like this one, because well, why would I? I'm sharing this amount of information with you, and I don't need to hear from my peers, my fellow brethren, other practitioners, about changing a light bulb, as I was just describing. That's perhaps interesting to you and relates to Dharma in some respects, but to me, as a bhikkhu practicing, I don't need to hear about other bhikkhus changing light bulbs. So, although many, I'm sure, don't. So I don't really have much of an authoritative knowledge on the subject of YouTube channels where there are good Dharma talks, ones that you should listen to. But if I were looking for particular Dharma talks and teachers, I'd certainly try and find, where you can in English, teachings from some of the elders of today's Thai forest tradition, and probably more towards the Thai forest tradition of Ajahn Chah, specifically the teachings, so the Dharma talks, and they can be the very old, not necessarily modern YouTube up-to-date talks, because the Dharma is timeless. And I think often the older the talks, so the old crackly, not very good picture, those videos are the best talks. They're the original talks of the teachers like Ajahn Sumedho, and then other disciples of Ajahn Chah, and in that lineage like Ajahn Jayasaro. But in other lineages, so for instance branching out and going into the other Ajahn Mun traditional Thai forest schools, disciples of Longta Mahaboa, specifically one, an English monk, Ajahn Punyawado, not Punyadharma, Punyawado. I'm not sure now. But there are talks from Ajahn Punyawado, very old, but recorded, probably on old Super 8 video at the time, that are very inspiring to me. So it takes a lot of searching around, but really the easy thing to do is find books, and not necessarily in the conventional way of going to the library or going on Google Books and trying to find books, but you can find books that are read to you, like audiobooks on YouTube these days. And a very good way of hearing Dharma first-hand from monks is biographies or autobiographies of monks who practiced. Thai forest monks, monks of other traditions, and even other borderline philosophers and philosophies. Books are best, because YouTube and channels and these days can be a lot of just chat and talk, which is very nice and good to listen to. But personally, I don't have recommendations because I don't do that. I'd rather sit down and read a biography cover to cover, or read some section of part of the Tipitaka to develop my understanding of the Dharma that way. But I do like to listen to, on occasions when one comes out, an audio version of, say, a biography or a book that I've read in the past about a monk, a Thai forest practitioner, or a recluse of another kind, someone who's renounced worldly life. The emphasis for my own practice and training always being on renunciation. That nekama, that quality, is what inspired me in the first place towards the practice and the Dharma. So often people come to Buddhism through meditation, and then the Dharma intellectually inspires them, and eventually they develop this quality of nekama, renunciation, and begin the process of renunciation. Now, to some extent I did all of this the other way round. I was meditating and that led to renunciation, and then I didn't know what on earth I was doing or why I was doing it, and Buddhism put it all together when I realized that acquisition was what caused the suffering, whereas renunciation was what liberated me from suffering, was freedom. So I can't recommend specific YouTube channels. that I listen to, because I don't. But if a talk, even recent talks from some of those elders in the Thai forest tradition, I specifically say that only because it's what I know, what I'm used to. I'm sure there are others, and certainly I'm drawn to that because there are Western practicing monks. We share a mother tongue. Not only are they very experienced in the Dharma, and they've practiced with those monks whom you can read the biographies of now going back a long, long time ago, in a very renunciant tradition. They've brought those teachings to the West in our own language, a common language. Now, it may be that English isn't your first language, and there are teachers of the Dharma whom have YouTube channels teaching in your first language, and I would always recommend going to those first. Otherwise, it's better to listen to Dharma in a language you don't understand at all, rather than trying to translate it, because it will be absorbed, and there is the common language of Pali. You'll pick up the words, you'll pick up the tone, and you'll pick up the nature of a speaker's practice by the way they teach. So that's really not an answer for you. If you are in any sort of groups with each other on social media, you'll find there will be people, other practitioners, who can recommend channels more able to do so than I can. So, because I'm not doing that, you see. So I'm not looking through YouTube, scrolling for Dharma talks, but I'll listen to maybe an old one, some old teachings of Ajahn Sumedho. Or if I hear of Ajahn Jayasaro, he normally only teaches in Thai these days, but one will come up in my feed somewhere, where he was visiting somewhere and giving a Dharma talk. I'll certainly listen to that. So I've probably said a couple of names there more than once or twice. That gives you a clue as to where I'd be looking if I was looking. But they don't necessarily have just one channel, and that's not necessarily where you can find all of their talks. Which is why I've tried to do this consistent, similar form of content, they call it, on this channel, in order that continuity is something that people can pick up and put down again. Maybe pick it up again later, or maybe not. But it has evolved to some extent, hopefully in terms of quality, and perhaps maybe less evidently, evolves with me and my own practice. Because after all I'm doing here is sharing with you my experience of putting the Dharma into practice in this bhikkhu life, where I am here in Sri Lanka currently, and previously in other places. So that's the purpose of this channel, but remaining relatively consistent as best as I can keep it throughout the time that it's been going and into the future. Maybe with eventually a little more Dharma, a little more interaction where it's possible, but always as long as it doesn't interfere with my own way of life, my own practice. And it's available and easy to do so. So it's dependent on the surrounding conditions. So on that note, we'll leave it there for today. Until next time, tomorrow I think. So be happy. Or anything that's useful, please hopefully put it into practice and use it. But if it's not, don't dwell on it, don't think about it too much. If you have any comments or questions, please just ask here or send me an email. The email address is on the channel description page. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. And today, with candles right until the end. Isn't that marvellous?